Hello and welcome to an episode of Cowboys Takeover. I'm Aaron James, and we're here coming off a bye week. So a very relaxing week where we just kind of put our feet up and watch everybody else beat themselves up and beat their bodies, get beat down a little bit. Another week in the NFL. We're bringing you a special episode today on Rivalry Roundup, because we want to bring everyone up to speed in talking about our division, talking about some of the fan base sentiment going around. And, going into this season, we were anticipating a very competitive division. And things are shaking out a little bit differently. Now, the Cowboys and Eagles still the top two and starting to spread ourselves up, but we're going to talk about it today. So without further ado, let me bring in wise counsel, Jason Kent. Jason, how are you doing after the bye week, man?
I'm feeling good. Like you said, right? We didn't have to really worry this week. We got to just sit back and watch and see what everybody else is doing, especially after last week's two big upsets with San Fran and Philly losing last week. It's one of those, hey, maybe it could happen again, and we can get ourselves maybe back in position to even battle for that number one seed. So it was nice not having to really worry this week about losing or being upset by an Arizona again. Just sit back and watch everybody play.
Yeah, I mentioned in our last recording that generally I don't like buys in October, but given how we've started the season, very rocky, a lot of up and down, still figuring out our true identity on offense. So it's like, you know what? Maybe this was a blessing in disguise that we just take a break, allow everyone to recuperate, clear their heads, heal up a little bit, and then come back at it. We're going to be talking about the Rams in the next for our Thursday night episode. But fortunately, we have that game before we go on to face the Eagles for the first time this year. But a good amount to get through today. It's going to be a little bit more of a shorter episode. But why don't we start by talking about those G-men, New York Giants, coming off of a division game themselves with the Washington Commanders, and kind of a back and forth game. I didn't watch it live, but kind of went back to watch the highlights of the game earlier today, and the game really could have gone both ways. A lot of fourth down attempts by the Commanders to try to make up ground and gain momentum in the game, but the Giants defense kind of just showed up. So the way we're going to approach it today is, we're going to talk through each team's best performing game, worst performing game, and then just kind of go into what the fan sentiment is, in our market, in the Philadelphia market. Maybe what the GM might be thinking at this point of the season. So I'm happy to start with the Giants' best game of the year. I mean, they had after a blowout loss to the Cowboys, they had a pretty good comeback game against the Cardinals. They were down, what was it, almost 28-3 or 10 or something along those lines.
Shut out, I think, in that first half of that game after getting shut out against the Cowboys and getting blown out pretty handily by Arizona, who I think got, it's showing to be not a good team until they play the Cowboys. But yeah, I think Arizona had lost the week before too, like not looking good, and they just came in manhandling that Giants team that first half.
Yeah, so that was a good rebound game for them, not from an overall perspective, but just the fact that the complete obliteration that took place on opening night against the Cowboys. It was good for them to come back and win a game like that, and you would think that would give them a lot of momentum, but it's just the losses have been piling up ever since then. So they lost to the 49ers, the Seahawks, the Dolphins, and they had a very close game against the Bills, but couldn't in a last game attempt for the go-ahead score with zeros on the clock.
Well,
unable to
even
get that done.
before, I think in that game too, I think right before half they had there was
Mhm.
like 9 seconds left or something like that before halftime, and they decided to try to run the ball instead of just maybe a pass and then kick a field goal. Yeah, they really shot themselves in the foot in that Bills game as well.
Yeah, some controversy in that play because Tyrell Taylor stepped in for Danny Dimes. I forget what his Danny Dimes injury is, but uh, Taylor checked the play call at the line of scrimmage and called for the run. Saquon doesn't get in, and they were out of timeouts. So those two plays back to back, and end of the first half, end of the game, were the deciding factors, and they fall short. So now they find themselves at 2-5. And
It's tough to really say either one of those wins. Like when you say, I know you were
yeah.
saying best win, worst win. I think it's tough to call either. Like, maybe you can call the second half of that game. Okay, that was a great performance. Their defense showed up. They put up a lot of points. It's tough to really call last week a win. I guess you're down, like you said, you're down Danny Dimes. But you beat a Washington Commanders team who, okay, they're 3-4. Maybe have a little bit of talent, but nobody really expected much from them. Yeah, it's tough for me. It's tough to call either one of those a real. Maybe Arizona, just because the way they came back and the second half of that game was so phenomenal. Maybe I'll call the second half of the second game they played good game. I'll give them that. We got to give the Giants something, so we'll give them that.
Yeah, I forget which game it was, but they were one of the last teams to score in the first half in the entire league. So just with Saquon Barkley, you'd think that they would be able to keep the momentum from last year, but now they're in such a position that a lot of analysts are calling for them to consider trading Saquon and kind of start their rebuilding process. So I think from a fan's perspective, I'd have to get some feedback from Dr. Borja, Dr. B, but I would say, at least from where I'm standing, I'm pretty confident the Giants are not going to make the playoffs this year.
Yeah, it's got to be disappointing for the fan base coming into this season. After last year, you kind of thought you had something to build off of. That's why you paid Danny Dimes, and that's why you tag Saquon. I don't remember if they actually signed him or not, but I know that at least they got the tag on him. And you draft that receiver in the first round. You sign Darren Waller. You expect a little bit more. And then week one happened, and it was the Giants. I feel like they thought it was a good test against, and it was terrible. And then the first half of that week too is just bad. And then like you said, they feel like they have momentum, but then they've also had a tough schedule. But a team like that, when you lose Danny, when you lose Saquon, it's really downhill. Like the real guys that carried you last year were those two. And you knew you needed a healthy Saquon all season. And with him missing games and Daniel Jones just not performing the way he was before, I think it's safe to say, yeah, the fan base has to feel disappointed. I think it's pretty safe to say they're not making the playoffs. They could go on some kind of toward run, but I'd have to agree with you.
Yeah, I mean, you do have a point. I'm looking at all their losses: Cowboys, Niners, Seahawks, Dolphins, Bills, all teams with winning records, and doing really well. Probably all playoff teams as well. Yep. So you got to cut them that. And in talking to some other Giants fans, they're like, man, our O-line, they're like, we don't even care what Daniel Jones is doing because we can't protect them. So
that's something we've heard for years about that franchise. I know that's something I've always heard from the Giants fans. They just can't get an offensive line.
So if I'm a Giants fan, I know that we're going to have to start rebuilding. As far as bargaining chips and trying to get draft capital, I think I would be okay with getting rid of Saquon and trying to get something for him. If we can get a third round, maybe a desperate team will throw in a compensation package from bumping a 3 to a 2.
I don't know if I would do it. Maybe it's tough to. I get if he walks, you lose. You don't get anything for him.
Mhm.
But it's tough to say we're going to give Saquon away for a third. Because he is, when, I get healthy, he's he's top 3 running back in the NFL. So it's tough for me to really say that. Like, to me, I would much rather try to get rid of, but I don't think you can get rid of Daniel Jones at this point. There's not much. I'd rather just, kind of hope for lightning in a bottle instead of doing a trade. And that's kind of what I would feel like if I was them. Maybe we get lucky and go on a run here late.
Okay. Yeah. I don't. Oh wait, actually, I think I might have their schedule pulled up. No, I changed out of it.
So right after, so right now coming out the break, it's New York and then Vegas. Then they got Dallas again. So so maybe go 2-1. Then Washington again, New England and Green Bay, which are all winnable games.
Mhm.
New Orleans is a winnable game. Then that's Philly, Rams, Philly. So it's not, coming out of this stretch really up until you face Philly on Christmas, it's really Dallas and then a lot of teams that they have a shot against. So it is something. I'm not saying, they could definitely make the playoffs, because what are they, 2-5? So you maybe 6-7 losses, maybe 7, 9-7 get you in. So that doesn't leave a lot of room for them, but I feel like everyone, you look at Dallas and the Eagles, outside of that, the rest of them are winnable games for them. It could go either way. So it's not out of the realm of possibility. If you, I tend to live by the logic when it comes to division matchups, they split. So if you just go by they split, they're gonna make the playoffs, or could at least finish 9-7. I guess, what is it, 10-7 now? They could do 10-7, 9-8.
Yeah. Yeah. And if that happens, then you don't want to play them in January, because that means they caught fire and they're doing some really good things. But I suppose, they have, based on what you shared, they definitely have gone through the toughest part of their schedule. But yeah, I mean, so we'll check in on the G-men again in the coming weeks, but let's talk about the Commanders.
So this is a team that did start the season hot, right? They come in, you start out, you beat Arizona 20-16, and then you have Denver, who I think a lot of people thought, getting Sean Payton this year, Russell Wilson, and okay, we have something here in Denver. They're not, they turned out not to be much, but that's something the Commanders, I'm sure, early in that season, were ecstatic about. And then they kind of hit a stretch there where you have to play Buffalo and Philly. Played Philly really tough, 34-31. Really got blown out by Buffalo. And then you feel like, okay, now we're going to get back on track here. We have Chicago. Chicago blew them out 40-20. And that's a game I feel like, if I'm a Commanders fan, that's one of those games where we feel like we should have won. Because then they come in the next week, beat Atlanta 24-16. And then, okay, we're back on track. And then you lose to a 1-5 team in the Giants. So I feel like this Commanders team is a team that you're just not sure of yet. I wasn't sure they would be a better team. I think I had them pegged as 4th in the division. To see him start out the season 3-4, it's better than the Giants, better record wise. They've lost to them, but you're like, okay, where when you look at this game or look at the team, if I'm the Commanders, I'm upset. If I'm a Commanders fan, I'm upset we're not 5-2 right now, though, because a team like, they should have probably beat the Chicago Bears. I know they're an okay team, but you don't lose by 20 points. And then we had every opportunity to beat the Giants. We should have beat the Giants. But I think they still have some growing pains because they're letting the kids start. Sam Howell start this year. And it feels like he's one of those kids you're just not sure of. He's completing a lot of passes, but he's taken 40 sacks so far this year. That's a lot of sacks through the first 7 weeks. That's over 5 sacks a game. He's got 7 interceptions, 9 tutters. And, the problem is that they don't really have a great run game there. So it's Sam Howell. He has to throw it. They're losing, so he's really got to chuck it up. They have 256 passing attempts to 143 rushing attempts. And they have some weapons in Samuel and McLaurin and Thomas. The running backs with Gibson and Robinson Jr. So they're a team that is showing potential this year. Like, they have a very young core of players. They have the really good defensive line. So it's something, if I'm the Commanders fan right now, I'm pretty excited for what we have. I know it may not be showing and you're going to have to take your bumps, but I'm excited for what we have because Sam Howell's really starting to look like he can be a player. To see a guy 65% completion percentage, not really throwing a ton of interceptions. He has the weapons, McLaurin, Samuel, and Logan. They have weapons that are younger that can grow together. So I think they have something to be excited for over the next, few weeks. The schedule coming up. They have some winnable games. They have some not winnable games. It looks like where the Commanders had that tough schedule early. The Giants had the tough schedule early. The Commanders have a lot of those tough games a little bit later, but I'm excited to see. If I'm a Commanders fan, I'm excited to see what they have going on because it's a lot of young talent, young core, and that's what you like to see. It reminds you, if they could build that offensive line and protect that quarterback, maybe they're a team that could be in the market to look at a running back going forward. They could put some things together, and they could play upset to a lot of teams this year. With the way they are, if they can get hot with how good they are down the stretch, they have some big, some teams that are potentially can be a top 1 or 2 seed. They could really mess some stuff up late in the season with some of those teams, I think.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, the eye test, to me, I think they found something unique in Sam Howell. If you just look at the fourth quarter drive to send the Eagles game into overtime, some very clutch throws, very composed. If for any quarterback, if you don't, especially a young quarterback, if you can't help them out with the run game to help with, give momentum and just build them confidence, he's going to struggle. So that's probably why, that completion percentage is not closer to 70. Again, this year with, Bieniemy coming in from the Chiefs. Now they have only 2 games where they scored under 7 points or less. They did put up 31 against the Eagles. So that was pretty impressive. And to your point, their schedule upcoming, they have the Eagles, Seahawks, Dolphins, Niners, and Cowboys to play twice. So
it's a tough schedule. It's a tough schedule for them.
It's a really tough schedule. And so speaking of trades, like we talked about with the Giants, what do you think about them considering would your mind be blown if they traded away Chase Young?
I really thought at the beginning of this season he was a kid that could, be thrown around because I think it's been kind of a disappointment for him, like to really put it bluntly. It's been a little bit of a disappointment. He was a very high draft pick. I think he was 2nd overall. So you really expected a lot from him, and it's been a lot of the injuries that's gotten him, but this year he has 5 sacks in 6 games. So if I'm the Giants, if you could get like a 1st round pick or maybe somebody, it has to be younger than him. So it's tough because you don't want to trade him for somebody older. But if you could get a 1st, 2nd round pick for him and you're not going to re-sign him, but they're a team, they have a lot of defensive linemen. So it's something, that's something I felt like they've built well. So if I'm Washington, if I'm looking about a year down the road, 2 years where I really believe I can be a contender, I do think Chase Young could be a difference maker with that defensive line with so many pieces. So I think it's really dependent on how they feel about themselves when they forecast out. If you don't think you could sign him and you can get a 2nd round pick for him, 3rd round pick for him at this point, I'd lean towards if I can get a 2nd, yes. Anything less, I'd rather not. because he's showing this year he's maybe worth the potential. And I really, if I'm not mistaken, I think he's only like 25 years old. Let me see. He's only 24. So I'm sorry, 24 years old. So he's still a kid. So it's, even with that injury history, he can still grow out. He's only 24 years old. So it would take a lot for me to move him right now, because I do believe when you look at their pieces, I think they can be something.
I think it's tricky because he seems like the type of guy that's going to want top tier money. And when you haven't lived up to your contract and just staying healthy, being on the field, right? Availability is the biggest part of anyone's role in the NFL. I think they got to take a hard look and be like, you know what, if we can farm this out and start fresh with someone, that would probably make more sense. But so yeah, I mean, I would seriously consider a third round. But I guess the other thing is, you're probably going to trade him to a contending team. A contending team is going to be a type to take him, not someone that's rebuilding themselves. Yeah. So it's going to be a tough market to get that one out.
I think 24 years old. I think people are going to look for a young kid that with all that potential, like pass rusher. Mm-hmm. I think they're going to look at the injury history and how young he is and be like, okay, if he just stays healthy, he can be a game wrecker. And I do think he still has that type of potential. So I do think the market would be pretty they could probably get a high second for him.
Okay.
At least I would believe so. I wouldn't I just find it tough to trade because the age thing is what gets me.
Okay.
It depends on how he finishes this season.
I just think I think he's the injury factor might make other teams most hesitant. But we'll see how things shake out. I mean, I really love him as a player. I want him to play into his 30s. I mean, the guy when he's on the field, he's a tier 1 defensive lineman. You don't want to see kind of like a Taco Charlton type of scenario with him where he just kind of falls off and I don't know why that name came to mind, but
he is a first round bust from Michigan. I know that.
So let's wrap up the division and talking about the team here in our neck of the woods, the Philadelphia Eagles. They're coming off a disappointing game from last week, against the Jets. A lot of Jets fans in central and in mostly northern New Jersey, but some of them kind of have made their way down to central south and greater Philadelphia area. So the Eagles, so a lot of kind of local hype built around that game. The Eagles hadn't lost to the Jets in like 12 matches or something along those lines. And, Hurts didn't look his best in that game. Definitely easy call for their worst performing game of the season. What do you think about, what would you say their best game is so far, Jason?
It really has to be last night, right? Like you go in this, it was, I think, a pretty historical offense they had through the first few weeks of the season in Miami. Mm-hmm. And just with all of the, the speed with Mozart being, a guy that's one of the top running backs in the league right now that nobody thought. He has like 12 carries for 207. It's like high school numbers that kid's putting up. And you got a kid in Tyreek Hill who's also, he was like he's got 900 yards through 7. Like he's just that dominant. And then Waddle, who just who has a lot of speed, and Tua, who's playing out of his mind, and that defense really shut him down. Hurts, he still kind of looked a little suspect, threw another interception for a touchdown. So his interception numbers, kind of some bad decisions, but when you go in and you really put up 31 points and you hold that Miami team to 17, a lot of that's a statement. Mm-hmm. And that's a pretty big statement after I think the Jets game, when you look at the schedule, that's a huge, with the way it played out with Miami, it looked like it could have been a huge trap game where they were looking like, not really thinking about the Jets. But like you said, yeah, after probably their only loss of the season where they looked horrendous, they came back with a big statement and just saying, hey, we're here and we're here to stay. As we're seeing right now, I know there's still some time left, but 49ers lost last week, and it looks like they're down 22-14 with 13 left in the fourth quarter. They could lose. We could see a lot of teams that are bad. So so it's just the Eagles. They're showing why everybody projected them, and why they made the Super Bowl last year, and why a lot of people thought they could go back.
Yeah, and a lot of the talk around the Eagles is that their games haven't really looked all that pretty. They haven't operated on all cylinders on offense like they showed last year. So they beat the Patriots by 5, beat the Vikings by 6, beat the Buccaneers by 14. Went into overtime with Commanders.
Yeah,
that could have been a big trap game for them, and then they have to face them again in Washington this time. The Rams gave them a run for their money.
it's like last possession. Yeah, there was one pretty much right down to the wire.
Yeah, so I was off mic, telling people that the Eagles were like a fraudulent team. But you know what? At the end of the day, championship teams, caliber teams, tier 1 teams, they win the games they're supposed to win. Exactly. And that's what they've been doing. And it just watching the Dolphins game, the way Hurts can extend plays, like even if you send in a DB to run after him, he still gets away. So I mean, the way the Jets got to Hurts, a lot of talk was about getting to Hurts mentally, because he just faced pressure after pressure, mostly up the middle, because of that D line of the Jets. Yeah. So hopefully, that's something that the Cowboys can replicate. Other teams, if you don't have a D line that can get to Hurts, he's just gonna pick you apart. I hate to say it.
The thing is, they have a dude that just out, he blew up at his quarterback, I think in week 2. Okay.
Yeah.
And this kid's a stud. Like, and we've talked earlier, and I don't want to, this isn't a, one versus the other, but to me, I said the prototypical receiver in the NFL is AJ Brown. Okay. Mm-hmm. So since that blow up, this kid has 9 for 131, 9 for 175, 6 for 127, 7 for 131, 10 for 137. It makes life as much as we, and I think even the Eagles fans see the flaws in Jalen Hurts. When you have a receiver like AJ Brown, it tends to cure some of those ails because he can just go get it. And he's just a big physical specimen of a dude who happens to play receiver very good. I think they said this is the first time ever somebody's had 125 yards or more in 5 consecutive games. Like, he makes life very easy for Jalen Hurts, because we saw before, and Devonta Smith is still a very good receiver. He could be a number 1 on a lot of teams. And then, Dallas Goedert. So the Eagles are definitely who we thought they were. And I never once thought they were frauds. I'm not an Eagle. Because I always went by that notion, it doesn't matter how you win. If you're winning the games you're supposed to win. And I know they lost to the Jets. Everybody, unless you're the 72 Dolphins, has lost a game. So you get it. But man, when they're really working it, they're a scary, and they showed it against the Dolphins. They're a scary team when they're on.
Yeah. Now, a Dolphins fan would argue that, they had some self-inflicted setbacks with penalties, touchdowns taken away, things of that nature. but ultimately, Tua couldn't really get into a rhythm in that game. But back to your point, I was going to say, AJ Brown's probably the closest thing we've had to since to be a TO since TO's era.
Yeah.
Now he has some of that Calvin Johnson, but he's a better route runner than Calvin was.
He's not as big as Calvin.
He's not,
Calvin was like
and
6'5".
Exactly, and that's what I was going to say. He's not catching balls, 12 feet off the ground, but man, he's just a physical guy that runs great routes, and he's hard to get down.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, Eagles are in pretty good shape right now, but they are coming into the juggernaut session of their schedule, where they're gonna face the Commanders, who are desperate for a win. And if you watch some of their press conferences recently, one of their defensive linemen kind of went off and kind of started cursing a little bit more than usual at just kind of how upset, frustrating he is. So they're gonna try to make a statement, I'm sure, against the Eagles. Then the Eagles have the Cowboys before they go on their bye. Then followed by the Chiefs, Bills, Niners, Cowboys again, and Seahawks.
So you're going to find out a lot about who that Eagles team is in that stretch. So this is a team where, the people that think they may be frauds are going to find out a lot. And the Eagles fans are one way or the other. They're either going to, after that stretch, they're going to either feel like we're the best team in the NFL, or, maybe we're not as good as we thought we were. I don't even like. I feel like if I'm the Eagles fans, though, I'm pretty confident. Even going into this stretch with those teams, I feel confident with what I've seen from my team this season.
So they have one loss. How many losses do you think they have when it's all said and done?
I'm going to go 3 total.
Wow. Okay.
So I do think 1 is to the Cowboys, and I think they either beat the Chiefs. It's either 1 to the one. It's going to be the Cowboys, and then 1 to either the Chiefs or the Bills. They'll beat 1 and they'll lose to 1. They could. It's possible. Like, I don't want to say they can sweep the schedule, but they're probably going to be favored in every game the rest of the season. Where's the Chiefs at? So it's at the Chiefs. So maybe the Chiefs are a slight favorite, but the Eagles could be the favorite in every game the rest of the season, though. So I wouldn't be shocked if they only lose 1 game the rest of the season.
Wow. So you think you didn't even mention the 49ers. You think they'll get by the Niners easily?
Yeah. Yeah. I think after watching, I do think the Eagles are right now. The Eagles are probably the best team in the NFL. By my power rankings.
Okay. Well, I have the Eagles. I'd say it's more likely that they have 4 losses total this season than 3. So I think they have 3 more. So 1 to the Cowboys. I think that the Chiefs are going to beat them, and then either the Niners or the Bills will get them.
That could totally happen. I just think they're a better team than the rest. Like, I don't trust in Josh Allen. I really think the Eagles are better than San Fran. I do 100% believe they're better than the Cowboys. They're going to be favored by a lot most of those games. Now it could happen, because if all it takes is one little thing, because Jalen Hurts did tweak a leg, I think his knee yesterday. So, you lose him, I think you're going to lose a good, but a lot of teams are like that. You lose your starter, it's down. But the Eagles, it feels like it's a little bit more bigger deal.
So we can't wrap up the Eagle session until we talk about the tush push, the brotherly love.
I push. Can't even lock it, bro. It's a good move. Because why? We sat there and watched Dak try it last week, and he totally ruined it. This dude, Jalen Hurts gets it up here. Apparently they love showing how much he squats because he squats over 600 pounds. He just pushes himself, and the ball's up here. When our quarterback does it, he leaves it down, by his leg, so he can't get the first. I've never had a problem with it because Tom Brady, I don't know how much they pushed him, but Tom Brady, they used to run the quarterback sneak all the time, and Tom Brady used to be fantastic at it. I have no
That's
problem
true.
with it. And other teams, we saw the Giants have two players get hurt when they attempted it. So and it's the most Giants thing ever. So it's tough to knock it. Just because you can't stop it, don't hate on it. If you're going to give me, player safety, legitimate player safety with the way they're making the NFL, I wouldn't argue it. But don't just say Eagles are better at it, so we're going to get rid of it.
Nick Sirianni said in the press conference, I see every drive starting at 1st and 9 because I know if it comes down to it, we're going to get that 4th and 1.
100%. That is like a 98%er right there. That's
the if you see how low Kelsey is able to get on that play, because it's all about leverage, right? Whoever's the lowest
100%.
is gonna get the push. And if you just look at how low Kelsey is, man, I think a lot of credit is to Hurts, but I think Kelsey is the reason why it's so effective.
Well, and you have your running back kind of running up and just throwing you forward. But I just also think they have a very good, offensive line. In that left side of that line, Landon Dickerson, Mailata, Kelsey there, Lane Johnson on the other side. I don't know who the right guard, but just they have such a phenomenal offensive line as well. So that when you have probably the best offensive line in the league, it doesn't hurt when you run that play.
This is true. This is true. All right, so we'll be talking about more about the Eagles next week after we play the Rams. So, Jason, we're here now through 6 weeks, through 6 games for the Cowboys. One thing we decided to talk about today is our top 2 players through the first 6 games. Let's do 1 and 1, but you go first. You share one, and then I'll share my first one after you.
My number one's DaRon Bland. I think the way he stepped in for Diggs after him getting hurt, him having to be a starter now for when you weren't really planning on it. I know, maybe last year there was the expectation before he got Gilmore, but the way he's really stepped up and made some big plays. It's not, a lot of times if you lose a cornerback like that, you feel like, man, this is a detriment to this team. You don't feel like he's a reason that they're losing some of those games. Feels like the games they've lost have really been, the run game kind of what we expected. So DaRon Bland's my number one. I'm very proud of the way and happy of the way he stepped up. When Gilmore or when Diggs goes down, you felt like there's going to be a drop off, and it really feels like there really hasn't been. And I know he did have the one dropped interception last week. We made it. I kind of spoke, but other than that, I think he's got 3 interceptions. Got some yardage. I think 2 touchdowns. So he's really exceeded my expectations.
Yep, and so I agree with you. I mean, Bland was. I think it's hard to argue against that. Just what he was asked to do. If you look at his productivity levels, he's right there with the tier 1 guys of the DBs. I don't think he's allowed a touchdown quite yet. He has just as many interceptions as anyone else this year. And I mean, he's a lot more, fundamentally sound in a lot of ways compared to Diggs. He's a ball hawk like Diggs is, but he's not going to bite on the double moves. At least we haven't seen as Diggs is vulnerable to. So, that was one thing I mentioned as soon as we heard about the Diggs injury was, hey, maybe this turns out to be a blessing, because what if it's the, division round of the playoff game and Diggs is the one that gives up the big touchdown. So I guess though, since we have the same one on that, I think he's solidified the fact that we do not need to go out and trade for a tier 1 DB to be number 2 with 1 with Gilmore. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I'm sad if they do make a trade on defense. I don't think it needs to be a DB at all.
Okay,
I'm actually really excited too for and have him going forward. It's not somebody, he's proven between last year with expectations and how well he played last year and how he's played this year. You're okay even letting Gilmore walk after the season, knowing you have Diggs back next year. You're okay, like kind of letting him go at the end of this season as well. It's not something you're worried about losing a top cornerback because you have one to replace him.
That's a really good point. I didn't even think about that because that means we're going to save some money if we don't have to hold on to Gilmore. But if we do, then it also makes us that much more dangerous. And, we continue to have the depth. But we're definitely going to be talking about that more. Who's your second one?
So I was really trying to, I really wanted to go one offense, one defense. And I was trying to look through our offense. And watching this season, nobody on offensive has impressed me, and it's very upsetting because you're just Dak's not what you thought he was. CD's not really game breaking. Pollard's got off to a rough start outside of the Arizona game. So number two, it's pretty obvious. It's a simple pick, but it's got to be Micah. He's got 5 sacks. He should have more. He's definitely seeing a lot more pressure. He's being asked to play a lot more positions right now. And they're moving him all over. So he's still the game wrecker he is. He still causes, when you're watching, he causes other players to get sacks as well. Because you do have to focus on him so much. And it does stink now because he is starting to get a lot of that respect where he's getting doubled and triple teamed. But for him still to get through, I didn't want to go 2 defensive players because I really was trying to find somebody offensively, but I couldn't justify anybody over Micah.
Okay. Well, when I thought for my second one, I really wanted to give a shout out who I thought was the most improved player. And so Osa Odigizua.
Dude, he's having himself he was a guy that I thought about, and because he's definitely stepped up his game this year more because last year he was showing the glimpses. Yeah. This year at DT, he's definitely he's got 3 sacks in the year, so he's got some tag. He's making some noise where you weren't 100% sure about that DT position. I like it. I like it a lot.
Yeah, and last year he was the benefactor what Parsons and Lawrence were creating, but now you see with him and Big Boy Hankins what they're doing in the middle, and we for the most part we've been controlling the run game. So for that reason, I know it's not an ultra sexy pick, with flashy numbers, but man, he's just been doing a phenomenal job. And also, I would say when it comes to CD Lamb, he's doing what he's supposed to do. Like, to me, he's meeting my expectations. He can only do so much, with the targets and what McCarthy is going to plan for. So
I agree with you. It wasn't trying
I know it's not a knock.
It's not so much knock on CD. It's more. It's going to be a knock on Dak because and to me it's Dak partially, McCarthy partially, because I just don't like the way our offense looks right now. This is, to me, I stated it in prior episodes. I think one of the Dak has looked really bad. He I don't remember him since early in his career looking this bad. And I just think it's partially the way McCarthy's calling offense, and I don't like it. You got to unleash Dak. He's proven to be a guy. So I think a lot with Gallup and CD, and even, I would think Cooks to an extent, I think a lot of their numbers looking so pedestrian has to do with McCarthy's play calling more than anything. I feel bad because I do think Dak is a better quarterback than this, and it stinks that I think McCarthy's holding him back.
Yeah, one thing I don't think I've shared with you before when it comes to Dak and his confidence in the pocket, I was wondering, how much of it, if any, is because Zeke is gone. Zeke is one of the more reliable pass protectors, right? So when you have your best friend that is going to take a hit for you and be able to deliver when it comes to protecting you, how much of that goes in the
100%.
mix.
Because you
Maybe,
don't have to
maybe
worry
it's like,
about it. Yeah, it's got to
yeah,
be. You don't have to worry about that other side. Zeke's going to most of 99% of the time Zeke's picking up that extra, and he was fantastic at picking up the free man. There has to be some thought in there that these guys are a little bit smaller, not as or Zeke was a big boy, so he can go hit that dude head on. Maybe these guys aren't the pass protector Zeke was, and that could definitely have some negative effects on him, thinking he has to get the ball out faster.
Yeah, but there's a lot going through my head right now what I want to say about McCarthy and his play calling, but it's just not the time. Not the time. But I mean that's what I had. That's what we had for today, fans, for our rivalry roundup episode. Jason, why don't you share with everyone where they can find us, and what platforms?
Yeah, you can definitely see us on. We're always streaming live, Facebook and YouTube. Cowboys Takeover Podcast for both, and then you can see us. You definitely see us on Twitter and Instagram. Cowboys Takeover Podcast on all platforms. That's where you just look us up. We really appreciate you guys. Give us, go give us a like, go give us a follow, give us a share. Like the videos, they're cool. We're good looking guys, right? Look at this. And we all love Cowboys, right? We got to support our team. We got to support the team that we live and die with every Sunday. So I know we're really excited to really get it going for the second half of the season, and hopefully we look a little bit better than we have so far. We need to put together some wins here, especially with the big rivalry with the Cowboys. With the Cowboys Eagles game coming up right after the Rams. So let's hope this week isn't a trap game, but we'll discuss more of that this coming Thursday. For Aaron James, I'm Jason Kent. This is Cowboys Takeover Podcast. This is our bye-week special rivalry roundup. Enjoy. Give a listen. We'll see you Thursday. We'll have you let you know what time.